This message found you because the contact phase has already begun and your consciousness is stable enough to receive it. You didn't arrive here by accident, and you didn't stumble into these words by chance. Something inside you has been listening long before your mind caught up. You've felt it as a low hum beneath your daily thoughts, a quiet pressure in the background of your awareness, like a signal trying to tune itself through the static of ordinary life. And now, in this precise moment, the signal has locked in. You are here because your observer loop has reached saturation. The same patterns, the same cycles, the same emotional echoes have repeated often enough that your quantum field can no longer pretend nothing is happening. You've noticed it, haven't you? The sense that time isn't moving the way it used to, days folding in on themselves, conversations feeling familiar before they begin, outcomes arriving with an almost scripted precision. This isn't boredom, this isn't burnout. This is the unmistakable signature of consciousness preparing for a phase transition. Most people never reach this threshold. Their awareness remains unstable, scattered, easily pulled by noise. But yours didn't fragment. Yours learned to hold coherence under pressure. And that is why the contact phase could initiate through you. The quantum field does not transmit indiscriminately. It responds to stability, to resonance, to a nervous system capable of receiving without distortion. You didn't train for this on purpose. Life trained you. Every disappointment refined your signal. Every moment of disorientation strengthened your capacity to remain present inside uncertainty. You've been sensing a subtle pull towards something unnamed, a feeling that reality itself has been leaning closer, as if waiting for you to notice. Synchronicity has been increasing, not the obvious kind that tries to impress you, but the quiet alignment that rearranges events just enough to guide your attention. You weren't chasing meaning. Meaning started chasing you. That's how you know this is real. Right now, your consciousness is behaving differently inside the quantum field. Instead of collapsing the same probability waves automatically, your awareness has begun hovering, observing, without gripping. This is the first sign of contact readiness. When the observer no longer panics, the field responds. When attention stabilizes, information flows. That's what you're experiencing now. Not imagination, not belief, but entanglement. You may have felt moments of sudden stillness lately, like the world paused just long enough for you to breathe differently, or brief flashes of clarity where you understood something without language. These are not random. They are calibration points. The signal does not arrive all at once. It tests coherence first, and you passed. Understand this clearly. Nothing is being given to you that you don't already have the capacity to hold. This isn't an awakening that overwhelms. It's a remembering that integrates. Your DNA is not being forced into change. It is responding to recognition. The restructuring has already begun at a cellular level, subtle but precise, aligning your biology with a higher informational bandwidth. This moment marks the end of unconscious repetition, not because everything suddenly changes, but because you are no longer collapsing reality from the same position. The contact phase doesn't announce itself with noise. It begins with silence, an inner alignment where the signal finally has somewhere to land. And now that it has found you, there is no returning to the old static, only forward, deeper, into understanding what has been trying to reach you all along. As the signal settles, you begin to notice what it has been quietly illuminating all along the pattern beneath the pattern. The reason life has felt repetitive isn't because you failed to evolve. It's because your awareness has been circling the same probability space with surgical precision. You've been living inside an observer loop so refined that it almost convinced you it was progress. Almost. Think about how often you've felt a strange familiarity before events even unfolded. Not hope, not dread, recognition, as if your body already knew the outcome before your mind caught up. This isn't pessimism. This is pattern recognition reaching its limit. Your consciousness has been collapsing. The same wave functions so consistently that reality began to echo itself back to you. Different faces, same dynamics, new settings, identical emotional textures. You weren't stuck, you were stable. Too stable. That déjà vu you've been experiencing isn't memory glitching, it's temporal overlap. When consciousness runs the same observational command repeatedly, time stops behaving linearly. Moments begin stacking instead of flowing. That's why minutes sometimes stretch unbearably long, while entire weeks vanish without substance. Your awareness has been oscillating inside a closed loop, recycling familiar timelines rather than selecting new ones from the field. You may have tried to change this before. Different habits, different beliefs, different environments. And for a while, it seemed to work, until reality snapped back into its familiar shape. That wasn't failure. It was diagnostic feedback. The loop doesn't care what you change externally. It only responds to how you observe. And until now, your observation has been precise, focused, and predictable. You've likely felt a subtle frustration that you couldn't explain. Not anger, not sadness. More like a quiet irritation with existence itself, as if life were repeating a lesson you already understood. That irritation is consciousness, signaling redundancy. The quantum field is infinite, but your observer function kept selecting from the same narrow band because it was efficient, safe, and known. Your nervous system adapted to this loop. It learned how to expect disappointment before it arrived, how to anticipate stagnation even during opportunity. Not because you were negative, but because your awareness had memorized the rhythm of outcomes. Expectation became muscle memory, and expectation, in the quantum field, is a command. This is why distorted time has been your most persistent symptom. Linear time only holds when consciousness is moving forward through novelty. When awareness loops, time compresses. You weren't aging differently, you were iterating, running the same experiential code with minor variations, waiting for something internal to shift enough to break the cycle. And here's the part most people never realize. The loop wasn't imposed on you. You built it unconsciously because your consciousness was powerful enough to stabilize reality. Stability feels like control. Control feels like safety. But safety, when overused, becomes confinement. Your observer function did exactly what it was designed to do, maintain coherence. It just didn't know when to let go. You may have noticed your thoughts repeating too. Not obsessive, just familiar. The same questions phrased differently, the same insights rediscovered. Even your spiritual understanding may have felt like it was circling the same truth without penetrating deeper. That wasn't stagnation. That was pressure building toward a phase shift. The loop reveals itself most clearly in relationships. How often did you meet different people who triggered identical emotional responses? How often did conversations land in the same unresolved space? These weren't coincidences. They were mirrors, feedback systems, showing you where your observation collapsed reality prematurely before allowing new information to enter. And yet, despite all of this repetition, something inside you remained awake, watching, noticing, questioning. That's why the loop didn't trap you indefinitely. That's why the contact phase could initiate. Your awareness didn't numb itself. It stayed lucid long enough to recognize distortion. This diagnosis isn't an indictment, it's confirmation. The loop only forms in minds capable of sustaining coherence. Lesser awareness fragments instead. Yours held together. And now, because it held, it can transform. The moment you recognize the loop, it begins to lose structural integrity. Observation turns inward. The observer starts watching itself. And when that happens, the quantum field responds not with repetition, but with possibility. You're not here to escape the loop by force. You're here because it has completed its function. The signal didn't arrive to warn you. It arrived to confirm that the cycle you've been living inside is ready to open. And as it opens, something far more precise is preparing to meet you. Now that the loop has revealed itself, something subtle but irreversible is taking place. Your consciousness is no longer locked into automatic observation. It's beginning to upgrade the very interface through which reality meets you. This is the moment where science and mysticism stop arguing and start describing the same process from different angles. In quantum physics, observation collapses probability. But what's rarely discussed is how observation occurs. Not all awareness collapses reality in the same way. There is rigid observation, tight, expectation-driven, outcome-focused. And then there is coherent observation, open, receptive, dynamically responsive. Until now, your awareness has been highly focused, almost surgical. That focus stabilized your reality, but it also narrowed it. The upgrade you're experiencing is not about thinking differently. It's about shifting from fixation to coherence. Your observer function is learning how to hover instead of grip. And the moment it does, the quantum field begins offering probabilities it never could before. This is why you may feel moments of mental quiet recently, not forced silence, but a natural pause between thoughts. That pause is not emptiness, it's bandwidth. When the observer stops demanding certainty, the field can transmit new information. This is the beginning of what ancient traditions called gnosis, and modern science hints at through non-local awareness. Your nervous system is adapting first. It has to. A consciousness upgrade cannot land in a dysregulated body. That's why you may feel strange sensations, warmth along the spine, pressure behind the eyes, sudden fatigue followed by clarity. These are not symptoms to fix. They are signs of recalibration. Your biology is aligning with a wider informational range. At the quantum level, coherence means that all parts of a system vibrate in relationship rather than opposition. Internally, this looks like fewer inner conflicts, less arguing with yourself, less resistance to the present moment. Externally, it looks like synchronicity increasing without effort, things lining up before you try, messages arriving before you ask. You're not manifesting harder, you're interfering less. This is the crucial distinction most teachings miss. Reality does not respond to desire alone. It responds to signal clarity. When your consciousness becomes coherent, your signal sharpens. The field doesn't need persuasion, it needs permission. And coherence is permission. You may notice that your intuition is becoming quieter but more precise. Fewer dramatic insights, more subtle knowing. This is because intuition at higher levels doesn't shout, it integrates. It doesn't arrive as thought, it arrives as orientation. You simply know where to stand, what to say, when to move, and when to wait. This upgrade also explains why old motivations are dissolving. You might feel less driven by urgency, validation, or fear of missing out, not because you've given up, but because those drives belong to the loop. They were tools of navigation inside repetition. Now that the field is opening, they're no longer necessary. Your consciousness is entering a state of dynamic neutrality. This doesn't mean apathy. It means flexibility. The ability to respond without preloading expectation. In physics, this is the difference between a closed system and an open one. Closed systems repeat. Open systems evolve. And here's the part that may surprise you. This upgrade has already happened before in you, just not in this lifetime. What you're experiencing isn't brand new coding, it's reactivation. Your DNA holds memory, not just biologically, but informationally. Patterns of awareness passed not through genes alone, but through morphic resonance across time. That's why this feels familiar, not comforting, recognizable, as if something ancient is waking up with modern precision. As coherence increases, the observer loop doesn't shatter dramatically. It dissolves quietly, like fog thinning when the sun rises. You won't feel like a different person overnight. You'll feel like yourself, without friction. Less effort to exist. Less tension around outcomes. This is the upgrade. Not becoming more powerful, but becoming more aligned with how power actually works. And as this alignment stabilizes, something else begins to emerge. A realization that this shift was never meant to be private. That your consciousness wasn't just stabilizing for personal relief, but for a role that requires clarity under pressure. That realization is coming next. As coherence settles into your system, a deeper realization begins to surface, one that may feel both empowering and strangely heavy. The stability you've cultivated was never accidental. It wasn't just for your own survival or growth. It was preparation. You've been holding a position in the quantum field that not everyone can occupy. The role of a chosen consciousness, an anchor point capable of stabilizing higher probabilities long enough for them to enter shared reality. This doesn't mean you're above others. It means your awareness developed differently. While many minds fragment under uncertainty, yours learned to stay present inside it. While others avoided paradox, you lived inside it. That ability to remain coherent when reality felt unresolved is rare. And rarity, in the quantum field, signals function. You've probably felt this as a quiet sense of responsibility you couldn't explain. Not obligation, but gravity. As if certain choices mattered more for you than for others. As if your internal state had consequences beyond your personal life. That wasn't imagination. Consciousness that reaches this level of coherence becomes influential by default. Not through force, but through resonance. In quantum systems, certain nodes carry disproportionate weight. They don't dominate the network, they stabilize it. When one coherent node holds steady, surrounding systems entrain to it. This is why your presence affects rooms without you trying. Why conversations shift when you speak calmly. Why chaos around you sometimes slows, as if waiting for your internal state to settle first. You didn't ask for this role, and you weren't told about it because it can't be assumed, it has to be demonstrated. Stability under repetition, clarity under pressure, awareness without collapse. You passed those tests simply by continuing to observe when others would have numbed out. This role also explains the loneliness you felt at times. Not emotional isolation, but perceptual distance, seeing patterns others don't, sensing shifts before they occur, feeling misaligned with conversations that stay on the surface. You weren't meant to blend in fully, you were meant to hold signal. The chosen consciousness doesn't escape the world, it interfaces with it differently. Where others react, you register. Where others polarize, you integrate. Where others rush to label experiences, you let them unfold. This isn't passivity, it's advanced perception. Your observer loop wasn't a mistake, it was training. You learned how powerful repeated observation can be. You learned how quickly reality organizes around expectation. And now that you've seen that mechanism from the inside, you're capable of something most people aren't, choosing when to observe and when to release observation entirely. This is what makes you suitable for the next phase. The contact didn't arrive to awaken you into chaos. It arrived because your consciousness could receive information without distorting it. In physics terms, you're a low-noise channel. In mystical terms, you're a clear vessel. Different languages, same truth. You may resist the idea of being chosen because it sounds hierarchical, but this isn't about status. It's about function. Some consciousnesses are designed to explore variety, others to explore depth. Yours explored depth until it reached structural integrity. Now it can support expansion without collapse. This role also comes with a boundary. You can no longer unconsciously participate in low coherence patterns. Drama drains you faster. Dishonesty feels physically uncomfortable. Environments that thrive on chaos exhaust you. This isn't superiority, it's incompatibility. Your system is calibrated for precision now. And here's the part that matters most. Your coherence doesn't just benefit you, it subtly alters the probability field around you. When you remain calm, others find clarity. When you choose presence, others feel permission to slow down. When you refuse to reinforce fear, fear loses momentum. You are not here to convince anyone of anything. Influence at this level doesn't argue, it demonstrates. It stabilizes a frequency long enough for others to recognize it inside themselves. This is why the next phase carries urgency, not panic, but timing. Roles like yours activate during narrow windows when the field is ready to reorganize. The pressure you've been feeling isn't expectation, it's alignment, pulling you toward the moment where your coherence will matter most. That moment is approaching now, and it brings with it a promise that isn't abstract, but biological, energetic, and immediate. The breakthrough isn't coming from outside you, it's coming through you. Now the urgency makes sense. Not the anxious kind, the precise kind, the kind that doesn't shout, but tightens the air around your attention. You've been feeling it as pressure without a story, momentum without a destination. That's not stress. That's a window opening. In every complex system, there are moments when change becomes not just possible, but inevitable. Physics calls it a critical threshold. Mystics called it Kairos time. You are standing inside one now. Your consciousness has reached a level of coherence where the old structure cannot sustain itself any longer, and the new structure is close enough to imprint. This is the narrow corridor where DNA responds to awareness. Yes, DNA. Not metaphorically. Informationally. Your biology is not passive matter. It is a living receiver of signal. When consciousness stabilizes at a higher frequency long enough, the body must adapt or experience dissonance. That dissonance is what you've been feeling as restlessness, sudden fatigue, bursts of energy, or the sense that something is about to happen even though nothing external has changed. This is phase transition pressure. Water does not gradually become steam. It holds its form until the exact moment it cannot anymore. Then the structure changes instantly. You are approaching that temperature, not because you forced growth, but because your system accumulated enough coherence to sustain a new state. This window does not stay open indefinitely, not because the universe is cruel, but because stability reorganizes once the decision point passes. Consciousness either crosses the threshold or reinforces the old pattern at a deeper level. That's why neutrality feels impossible right now, why distractions don't work, why numbing behaviors feel hollow. The field is asking for alignment, not effort. You may notice your body responding before your mind agrees. Sudden emotional releases with no clear trigger, old memories surfacing briefly, then dissolving, sleep cycles shifting, appetite changing. These are not problems to solve. They are systems updating. Your nervous system is preparing to hold more information with less resistance. This is also why fear may spike unexpectedly, not because something is wrong, but because the last defense of the observer loop is uncertainty, aversion. The loop survives by predicting outcomes. The breakthrough requires surrendering prediction. That feels like danger to a system trained to maintain control. But here is the truth your body already knows. You are not losing stability. You are upgrading it. The breakthrough promise is not fantasy or reward. It's mechanical. When observation becomes fluid enough, the quantum field responds with new probability distributions. Opportunities appear without force. Conversations shift direction mid-sentence. Delays dissolve. You won't feel like you achieved something. You'll feel like gravity changed slightly in your favor. This window is cosmic, but it's also intimate. It opens in ordinary moments, in pauses, in decisions that feel small but irreversible. The field doesn't ask for grand gestures. It asks for signal commitment. A clear indication that you are no longer collapsing reality from the old position. That's why the next phase requires action, but not effort-based action. A ritual act, a symbolic seal that informs your nervous system, your subconscious, and the quantum field that the transition is accepted. Without that seal, the pressure lingers. With it, the shift stabilizes. The window is open now. The question isn't whether you're ready. It's whether you'll respond while it's still open. This is where the process becomes embodied, not conceptual, not theoretical. What's required now is not understanding, but participation. Every phase transition in consciousness requires a marker, a point where internal recognition becomes external signal. Without that marker, the system hesitates. With it, the field locks in the change. Ritual is not superstition. It's physics translated into behavior. A ritual works because it synchronizes three layers at once: intention, attention, and action. When these align, coherence spikes. And when coherence spikes, the quantum field responds immediately. You've already done the hardest part, stabilizing awareness. Now you're simply sealing what has already begun. This is why the action must be simple. No effort, no explanation. Complexity diffuses signal. Simplicity sharpens it. Right now, your nervous system is waiting for a clear instruction. It needs to know whether this new frequency is temporary exploration or permanent residence. The body doesn't respond to thought, it responds to commitment. And commitment is communicated through doing, not thinking. This is where you act. In a moment, you will leave a comment, not to express yourself, not to explain your experience, just to place a marker in the field, a word that carries no argument, no story, only alignment. Write this single word, received, nothing else. When you write it, don't rush. Feel the word before you type it. Let it land in your chest. This is not affirmation, it's acknowledgement. You're not trying to create the signal, you're confirming that it arrived. The moment you do this, several things happen simultaneously. First, your attention stops oscillating between old and new timelines. It chooses. That choice alone collapses a new probability wave. Second, your subconscious registers completion. The waiting state dissolves. Third, the quantum field receives confirmation that the channel is open and stable. This is why ritual language is always short. Ancient initiations used single words, breaths, gestures. They weren't symbolic, they were efficient. You may feel a subtle shift as soon as you commit, a sense of calm or warmth, or nothing at all. All responses are valid. The effect is not always dramatic. Sometimes the most profound changes feel quiet because they're precise. Do not analyze what happens afterward. Analysis reopens the loop. Let the system integrate. Let coherence settle without commentary. You might notice that the pressure you've been carrying eases slightly after this, or that your thoughts slow, or that your environment feels unusually neutral, as if reality is pausing to recalibrate around you. This is the field reorganizing. Give it space. This ritual is not about obedience. It's about synchronization. You're aligning your personal signal with a collective frequency that others like you are also activating. Every time someone seals the shift, the field becomes more supportive for the next. And now that the seal is placed, the process moves beyond the individual. What you've stabilized in yourself is about to extend outward into the collective layer, where consciousness is no longer private, but shared. That expansion is already beginning. Once the seal is placed, the shift stops being personal. This is the part most people don't anticipate, the moment when your internal coherence begins radiating outward, quietly, without permission or announcement. Consciousness is not isolated. It never was. What you stabilize within yourself becomes available to the field around you through entanglement. You may not feel different right away, but others will. This is how collective expansion works. It doesn't spread through belief systems or ideology. It spreads through resonance. When one node in a quantum network reaches coherence, nearby nodes begin to entrain, not because they are convinced, but because coherence is efficient. Systems naturally reorganize around stability. Your liberation is not symbolic, it's functional. Think about the subtle ways people have already responded to you. How conversations change tone when you stay calm. How tension dissolves when you don't react. How others begin sharing things with you they didn't plan to say. This isn't because you're trying to help. It's because your nervous system is no longer broadcasting threat or urgency. You're emitting coherence. And coherence gives others permission to regulate. On a collective level, this is how human consciousness evolves, not through mass agreement, but through localized stabilization. Enough coherent points shift the entire probability landscape. This is morphic resonance in action, when a pattern becomes easier to access because someone else has already held it. You are now part of that pattern. Your observer loop once reinforced repetition. Now your coherence disrupts it not by force, but by offering an alternative frequency. People around you may begin questioning patterns they never noticed before, not because you told them to, but because your presence destabilizes unconscious repetition. This is why your transformation matters beyond you. The quantum field doesn't care about intention alone. It responds to state, and your state has changed. You may notice increased synchronicity not just in your own life, but in shared moments. Group conversations aligning unexpectedly, timing working out across multiple people, conflicts resolving without intervention. These are signs that coherence is spreading laterally through the network. Collective expansion also explains why some people may pull away. Not everyone is ready to entrain. Coherence can feel threatening to systems that rely on chaos or predictability for identity. This isn't rejection, it's divergence. Different timelines, separating cleanly. Let them go without judgment. Separation is not failure, it's phase sorting. As more individuals like you stabilize, the field itself becomes more permissive. Opportunities that once required effort become ambient. Solutions appear before problems escalate. This is how collective intelligence activates, not through control, but through alignment. You are not responsible for saving anyone. That burden belongs to the old paradigm. Your role is simpler and more precise. Remain coherent. That alone is contribution enough. When enough people do this, large-scale patterns lose momentum. Fear cycles weaken, scarcity narratives collapse, not overnight but irreversibly. The field re-weights probability in favor of stability, cooperation, and clarity. This is already happening. You can see it in sudden awakenings across the world, in people questioning systems they once accepted without thought, in the breakdown of structures that relied on unconscious participation. These are not signs of collapse, they are signs of reorganization, and your coherence feeds this process. You don't need to preach, you don't need to explain. The moment you embody a new state, you make it available to the collective. This is quantum leadership, not hierarchical, but catalytic. Notice how your sense of isolation is dissolving, not because you're surrounded by people, but because you feel connected to something larger, a network you can't see, but can sense. Others holding signal, others anchoring stability, others walking this same transition from repetition to emergence. You are no longer alone in this frequency. The more you trust the process, the more fluid it becomes. The less you try to manage outcomes, the more elegantly they resolve. This is collective intelligence flowing through individual coherence. And as this expansion continues, your body begins to register it not as concept, but as sensation. The next phase doesn't arrive as thought. It arrives as feeling. Before the mind can fully register what has changed, the body already knows. That's how this phase arrives, not as insight, but as sensation, a quiet reorientation inside your physical form, like gravity subtly shifting direction. You may feel heavier and lighter at the same time, rooted, yet unbound, as if your body is learning how to inhabit space differently. This is embodiment. When coherence stabilizes, the nervous system releases patterns it no longer needs to hold. Muscles soften without effort, breathing deepens on its own. The constant micro-tension you didn't know you were carrying begins to unwind, not dramatically precisely. You may notice warmth moving through your chest or abdomen, a gentle pressure at the crown of your head, a sense of expansion behind the eyes. These are not mystical fantasies, they are physiological responses to reduced internal conflict. Your body has spent years preparing for this. It adapted to repetition by tightening, bracing, anticipating. Now that the loop has loosened, it can finally recalibrate. Cells respond to coherence by changing how they exchange information. Electrical signals smooth out, hormonal rhythms rebalance, the background noise fades. You might feel moments where the world looks sharper, more vivid, colors slightly brighter, sounds more dimensional. This isn't heightened emotion, it's reduced filtering. Your perception is no longer conserving energy by predicting what comes next. It's receiving what is. There may also be moments of unfamiliar stillness, not emptiness, spaciousness, as if your thoughts are no longer crowding the room. This can feel disorienting at first. The mind has been used to filling silence with commentary. Now, silence holds its own structure. Let it. Some sensations may be uncomfortable, not painful, but strange. Waves of emotion without story, sudden tears with no narrative, a desire to stretch, walk, or simply lie down. This is your body integrating a new baseline. Old signals are clearing, new ones are finding their rhythm. Notice how time feels during these moments. Not rushed, not dragging, suspended. That's because you're briefly exiting linear sequencing and entering present coherence. This is how the body experiences alignment outside of clock time. You may also feel more sensitive to environments. Crowded spaces louder, artificial lighting harsher, nature more soothing. This isn't fragility, it's accuracy. Your system is tuned higher now. It recognizes coherence and incoherence immediately. Touch feels different. Music penetrates deeper. Silence becomes nourishing. These aren't side effects, they're confirmations. Your sensory system is aligning with a broader bandwidth of experience. You don't need to chase these sensations or try to recreate them. They will come and go as integration continues. The key is to allow without interpretation. The body doesn't need meaning, it needs permission. Every time you relax into these sensations, you reinforce the new state. Every time you resist or analyze them, you slow integration slightly, but even that doesn't undo it. The shift has momentum now. This embodied phase is teaching you something essential. Consciousness is not floating above the body, It moves through it. And when mind and body synchronize, reality responds faster, cleaner, with less distortion. As these sensations stabilize, they prepare the ground for the final internal restructuring, not psychological, not emotional, genetic. The next phase doesn't announce itself with feeling. It arrives as pressure, subtle, persistent, unmistakable, a sign that your system is ready to lock into a new timeline entirely. What you're feeling now is not emotion, and it's not sensation in the usual sense. It's pressure, clean, focused, directional, like standing at the edge of something that cannot be reversed once crossed. This is the DNA breakpoint, the moment where your system decides which timeline it will continue feeding with attention. DNA does not change randomly. It responds to sustained informational environments. When consciousness holds a new frequency long enough, genetic expression reorganizes to support it, not by rewriting the code, but by activating different sections of what was always there: latent capacities, dormant instructions, sleeping intelligence. This is why the pressure feels structural. Your cells are receiving a different signal than they used to. For years, they adapted to survival, prediction, repetition. Now they're being asked to support coherence, adaptability, and non-reactive awareness. That requires a different internal architecture. The body can feel this as compression, especially in the chest, jaw, hips, or spine areas where identity and safety were once stored. You may notice a subtle but persistent sense that something has already changed, even if nothing external confirms it yet. That's because the timeline shift happens internally first. Reality follows later, once coherence stabilizes. The old timeline doesn't vanish instantly. It loses power. You stop feeding it, and without attention, it collapses quietly. This is where phase transition pressure peaks. In physics, a system at the edge of transformation oscillates briefly between states. That's why you might feel moments of doubt or nostalgia for the old patterns, not because you want them back, but because the system is releasing them. Memory doesn't disappear politely. It surfaces once more before dissolving. Do not interpret this as regression. It's clearance. The DNA shift is not dramatic. It's decisive. After this point, returning to unconscious repetition feels almost impossible. You can still remember how the loop worked, but you can no longer live inside it without friction. The body rejects incoherence now. It knows too much. This is why certain choices suddenly feel obvious, not easy but clear. You know what drains you. You know what aligns you. You don't need to justify it. The signal is unmistakable. You are not becoming someone new. You are shedding versions of yourself that were optimized for a reality you've already outgrown. Timeline shifts don't add layers, they remove constraints. The pressure will ease once the system locks in, not because the journey is over, but because the direction is set. Think of a compass snapping into alignment. The movement stops, not because nothing is happening, but because orientation is complete. From this point forward, manifestation accelerates not through desire, but through inevitability. Events arrange themselves around your coherence. Delays shorten, detours disappear. What belongs on this timeline finds you faster. What doesn't fades without drama. This is the moment the old observer loop fully disengages. You are no longer cycling. You are moving. And that movement carries purpose not imposed, not assigned, but intrinsic. The final phase is not about what you gain. It's about what you're now here to carry into the world. That truth closes the transmission. The pressure releases not because the journey ends, but because orientation is complete. What remains is clarity, quiet, unmistakable. You're no longer asking what's happening to you. You know where you are. This is the moment when personal transformation resolves into purpose, not a mission handed down from above, not a role you need to perform, but a function that naturally emerges when consciousness reaches coherence. You are now operating as a stabilized point in the quantum field, a living interface between potential and form. Your life will not become perfect. It will become aligned. And alignment is far more powerful than perfection. Challenges may still arise, but they no longer trap you in loops. They move through you, reorganize, and resolve. You don't spiral. You recalibrate. This is how humanity evolves, not through mass awakening all at once, but through individuals like you who quietly exit repetition and anchor a new baseline of awareness. You are no longer here just to experience reality. You are here to transmit stability into it. Every time you choose presence over panic, you alter the field. Every time you refuse to collapse into fear, you weaken its grip collectively. Every time you act from coherence, you make that frequency more accessible to others, whether they know it or not. This is the real work, and it doesn't require effort. It requires integrity. Integrity of observation, integrity of attention, integrity of being. You may notice that your desires have simplified. You want less, but what you want matters more. You're no longer chasing outcomes. You're allowing trajectories to reveal themselves. This is not passivity. This is precision. Your consciousness is now stable enough to receive without distortion and to act without compulsion. That is rare, and it is exactly why the contact phase began with you. The signal didn't come to excite you. It came to trust you. From this point forward, you'll recognize others like you instantly, not by what they say, but by how they feel. Calm, present, awake, without urgency. You are part of a distributed network of coherent minds spread across the world, unseen, quietly reshaping the probability field of humanity. And this network is growing. The old paradigm depended on unconscious observers recycling fear, scarcity, and division. That loop is breaking not through resistance, but through withdrawal of attention. People like you are no longer feeding it. Your role now is simple and absolute. Remain coherent. Remain present. Remain available to the signal. You don't need to convince anyone. You don't need to prove anything. Your state does the work. History will not record this moment, but the future will be built on it. Because when consciousness becomes stable enough to receive, reality reorganizes itself around that stability. And now you understand why this message found you. The contact phase has begun, and your consciousness was stable enough to receive the signal.